Every Friday for 25 years I listened to the same sound, the heavy basement door clicking shut. And the key turning twice. I swear on my old bones. The night I finally broke that door down, what I saw inside made me fall to my knees. My name is Margaret Louise Hawthorne, but the world calls me Maggie. I'm 78 years old now, with silver hair that doesn't listen to a comb anymore, and hands that tremble when I carry my teacup. And today, after more than half a century of carrying this weight, I'm finally ready to tell this story. I don't know if it will make you angry. I don't know if you'll judge me. But I hope, truly hope, that somewhere out there another woman my age will hear this and understand she was never alone. So come sit with me. Let's go back in time. Back to the 1960s, when my world smelled of fresh bread, warm laundry, and the cologne my husband used to wear every Sunday morning. I grew up on Maple Street in a sleepy Pennsylvania town where every neighbor knew your birthday and every child had grass-stained knees. Life moved slowly back then, gentler, I think, and happiness was a bowl of stew simmering on the stove, or the sound of my mother humming while she hung clothes on the line. I met my husband, Robert, in the summer of '63. He had that quiet kind of charm, the kind you didn't notice until he smiled at you. Lord, that smile, straight white teeth, dimples, and this shy way of looking down before meeting your eyes again. He worked at the town's hardware shop, always smelled faintly of cedarwood and machine oil. I used to buy things I didn't need just to talk to him. We married 2 years later in a tiny church with wooden benches and a steeple that always needed repainting. I wore a dress my mother stitched by hand, simple white cotton, no lace, just honesty. And when I walked down that aisle, I truly believed I had found a man who would never hide anything from me. Our first home was a small blue house with peeling paint and a wide backyard. It had an old-fashioned basement, not the modern kind with carpet and lights. No, this one was stone-walled, cool, always smelling faintly of earth and iron. Robert loved that basement. Said it was his sanctuary, his project room, his little corner of peace. Back then I didn't question it. Back then I didn't question anything. We had 2 children, Emily first, then Jacob. I can still smell the baby powder on their skin and hear the sound of their tiny socks tumbling in the dryer. My whole world was them, packing lunches, sewing Halloween costumes, reading bedtime stories until my voice cracked. Robert was a good father, at least in the early years. He worked hard, came home tired, and kissed the kids goodnight. He never raised his voice, never slammed a door, never drank more than 1 beer on a Sunday. Everything seemed normal. Everything felt normal. Until the basement ritual began. It was the fall of 1970. The leaves outside were turning amber and gold. I had just finished making meatloaf, Emily's favorite, when Robert suddenly stood up from the table. "I'll be downstairs for a bit," he said. No smile. No explanation. He walked to the basement door, closed it gently, and locked it. Single click. Then another. I remember staring at the door, a fork still in my hand. When he finally came back up 3 hours later, his face was pale. Wet, almost like he'd splashed water on himself. He didn't look at me. Just muttered something about work stuff and went straight to bed. I didn't push. Women back then, we were raised to keep the peace. Raised to believe that asking too many questions made you a difficult wife. I told myself it was nothing. If only I had known what that first lock meant. It happened again the next Friday. And the one after that. And the one after that. Every single Friday. Robert locked himself in the basement for 3 hours. Same time. Same silence. Same coldness when he returned. And though he always brushed past me, always avoided my eyes, I stayed quiet. For the sake of our children. For the sake of the home we built. For the sake of the woman I used to be, young, hopeful, too trusting for her own good. If I had known then that this routine would last for 25 years. If I had known what he was hiding down there. I wouldn't have remained silent. I wouldn't have swallowed my questions. I wouldn't have let those keys turn. But hindsight is a cruel friend. It tells you everything when it's already too late. I kept a small journal back then, nothing fancy, just a brown leather notebook Robert bought for me in '69. I still have it, tucked inside my dresser, its pages yellowed and smelling faintly of lavender from the scented drawer papers I used to buy. When I open it now, the ink has faded, but the memories, Lord, the memories are still sharp. One entry from early 1971 reads, "Robert went downstairs again. Locked the door as usual. I waited at the kitchen table with the kettle warming. I don't know why my chest feels tight. It's probably nothing. Probably nothing. Those were my favorite words back then. The words I used to silence myself. Life outside the basement mystery was simple, comforting even. On Saturday mornings, the whole neighborhood smelled of fresh biscuits and bacon grease. Women hung clothes outside on wooden lines, waving at one another as the wind lifted their skirts. Children raced across lawns without shoes, their laughter echoing across entire blocks. I used to take Emily and Jacob to the big farmers market downtown. Wooden crates filled with apples, handmade soaps wrapped in brown paper, jars of honey that sparkled in the sunlight. We'd return home with our arms full, warm bread tucked under my elbow, little pastries the children couldn't resist. Robert never came with us. He always said crowds made him uneasy. I didn't argue. Not then. The years rolled by gently. Life had rhythm, morning chores, porch swings at dusk, holiday dinners filled with laughter. But even during the sweetest moments, every Friday cast a shadow. It was 1974 when I noticed it. I had been saving up grocery coupons, stretching every penny for Christmas gifts. One afternoon, I opened Robert's coat pocket to drop in a note reminding him to pick up milk. I found an envelope. Unsealed. Fat with cash. Not a few bills, hundreds of dollars. Our family didn't have much. Robert worked 6 days a week at the hardware shop, and I cleaned houses on the side to buy school supplies. We budgeted everything. So why was he hiding money? When he came home that evening, I tried to ask softly, casually, without sounding accusatory. Robert, sweetheart, what's this for? He froze. Just for a second. But I saw it, the flicker in his eyes. Then his voice turned cold, so unlike him. It's for something I'm working on. Don't go through my things again. He'd never spoken to me like that. Not once in all our years. I apologized because that's what wives did in those days and handed the envelope back. But that night, as he locked the basement door again, I heard something I'd never heard before. A heavy thud, followed by metal scraping. Then, silence. Too much silence. And just like that, the seed of suspicion was born. In the summer of '76, America was full of loud celebrations, firecrackers, parades, music festivals. But inside our home, everything grew quieter. Robert began keeping odd hours. Waking before dawn. Sitting alone on the porch swing at night, hands clasped together like a man holding secrets. Sometimes I'd find him staring at the basement door as if listening for something only he could hear. His moods changed too. Smiles became rare. His shoulders always tense. And on Fridays he barely spoke at all. I told myself it was work stress. The store had new management. Things were difficult. But deep inside I felt something shifting, like a hairline crack forming in a mirror. Starting small, then spreading across everything. It happened in winter. December 1977. A storm had covered the neighborhood in thick white snow. Robert had gone to the basement for his usual Friday ritual, and the house felt so still you could hear the radiators breathing. As I straightened the children's school papers on the dining table, a slip of paper fell from one of Robert's old books. I picked it up. Only 5 words were written on it. Not yet. She's not ready. There was no name. No date. No explanation. My hands trembled as I held it. I stared, trying to make sense of it. Who wrote it? Who was she? What wasn't ready? When Robert came upstairs that night, he was pale again. I wanted to show him the note, ask him directly, push past the fear. But the words stuck in my throat. I folded the paper and hid it in my apron pocket. Something inside me whispered, "He's hiding more than you think." By the summer of '79, our children were almost teenagers. Emily had developed a love for drawing, and Jacob spent his afternoons building little inventions out of scrap metal and broken toy parts. They were good kids, bright, affectionate, grounded. But even they noticed their father's strange habits. One day, Jacob tugged at my skirt while I was shelling peas on the back porch. "Mom," he whispered, "why does Dad always smell like burnt wires after he comes out of the basement?" I froze. As I had smelled it too, a sharp, electric scent, like something overheating. I brushed Jacob's hair back and forced a smile. "He's just doing work down there, sweetheart." But my heart knew better. Machines don't run without power. Tools don't heat without reason. And Robert, he wasn't building anything for the house. Not that I ever saw. Green. The truth is, I was scared. Not of Robert hurting me. He never raised a hand. I was scared of the truth itself. What if he was in debt? What if he was sick? What if he was meeting someone? What if the basement held answers I wasn't ready to face? And besides, women of my generation didn't go searching for secrets. We endured. We kept the peace. We protected the image of a stable home, even if our hearts cracked quietly behind closed doors. But each Friday became heavier. Each clue added weight. Each locked door whispered louder. By the early 1980s, my marriage, once full of warmth, felt like two strangers sharing a house. And every time I heard that basement lock turn, I felt another piece of me crumble. Every Friday, the sound of that basement door clicking shut started to echo in my mind long before Robert even touched the key. By the early 1980s, it wasn't just a sound. It was a signal, a drumbeat marking the beginning of something I didn't understand. I would stand at the kitchen window, watching the sunlight shift across the garden, pretending to tidy up while my chest tightened. Emily and Jacob, now old enough to notice tension, sometimes glanced at me with quiet questions I couldn't answer. I wanted to tell them nothing was wrong, even as doubt curled around my heart like smoke from the stove. It was a humid August afternoon when the next clue appeared. I had been dusting the living room shelves when I noticed Robert's briefcase was slightly ajar. A folded piece of paper peeked from the top, yellowed and fragile. I pulled it out, hands trembling, and found a list of dates, times, and odd numbers I couldn't decipher. At first, I thought it might be some old accounting record, but a strange feeling told me it was something else entirely. When Robert returned and saw me holding it, his face shifted ever so slightly, a shadow flickering across his features before he forced a calm smile. "That's nothing, Margaret. Just old work notes," he said, snatching the paper from my hand. The dismissive way he spoke ignited a quiet, simmering suspicion that I could no longer ignore. Over the next few weeks, more oddities surfaced. Money would vanish from my purse, small amounts, just enough to make me doubt my own memory. The children occasionally asked why Dad always went downstairs with a flashlight and sometimes a small bag he returned empty-handed. And there was the faint smell always lingering, a mix of dust and something chemical like paint or oil. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself he had hobbies, secret projects, maybe even repairing old machines to sell. But deep down I feared it was something darker. One evening, I overheard a hushed conversation on the phone. Robert's voice was low, clipped, and his tone carried urgency I had never heard before. I didn't recognize the other side of the line, but his words, fragmented, cautious, made my stomach twist. "I told you, it's not ready, she can't know yet," he said. My hands gripped the counter so tightly I thought they might bruise. That phrase, "she can't know yet," reverberated in my mind, bringing with it years of unanswered questions. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the walls of my house shrink as the basement loomed larger in my imagination. The children noticed too. Emily began drawing pictures of the basement, capturing the shadows and the heavy door in careful, precise strokes. Jacob started sneaking peeks, pretending to play with toys in the hallway outside the door. Once I caught him pressing his ear against it, listening, then bolted toward me with wide eyes. "Mom, there's something weird down there," he whispered. I kissed his forehead and whispered assurances I didn't believe myself. I wanted to investigate, to pry the truth from the shadows, but fear held me back. Fear of what I might find. Then came the night of the strange sound, a scraping, almost metallic, like the chains of a windmill grinding against itself. I had been cleaning the pantry when the noise startled me, followed by the familiar click of the key turning. But this time it was different. There was a pause, longer than usual, before Robert emerged. His face was pale, hands trembling slightly, and when he looked at me, there was a tension in his eyes I had never seen before. For the first time, I wondered if he had been crying or if he had been doing something far worse than I could imagine. I tried to speak, to ask, to confront the truth that had been building for over a decade, but the words froze in my throat. By 1985, the basement had become a silent witness to our marriage. It stood there, locked and mysterious, a symbol of secrecy, holding the weight of years of unanswered questions. I started noticing little things Robert would leave behind, tiny scraps of paper, unusual tools, receipts for places I had never heard of. Each piece was a puzzle I was too afraid to assemble. And still, life continued. The children went to school, birthdays were celebrated, Christmas lights twinkled in the windows. I smiled, cooked meals, laundered clothes, all while a knot of dread tightened in my chest every Friday afternoon. One particularly cold November, I discovered a small envelope tucked between old paint cans. It had my name scrawled on it in Robert's handwriting but was dated 5 years prior. Inside was a single photograph of the basement door, slightly ajar with a shadow stretching along the concrete floor. On the back, a note simply said, "Not everything is as it seems." My hands shook as I clutched it, heart hammering. I wanted to confront him immediately, but another part of me, the part that had silenced itself for years, urged patience. Observation. Waiting. I told myself I was preparing for the right moment, though I didn't yet know what that would mean. By now, the basement wasn't just a locked room, it was a character in our lives, one that held secrets, power, and attention that stretched across our home. I began keeping small records of Robert's patterns, jotting down times, odd behaviors, and the smells that lingered. It became a quiet obsession, a coping mechanism for the anxiety that had been growing for more than a decade. And with each Friday that came and went, with each locked turn of the key, the truth seemed to hover just out of reach, waiting for the day I would finally find the courage to confront it. Afreen, that day, the day I broke down the basement door after 25 years, seemed impossibly far away, yet it had been forming silently in the cracks of our lives all along. Each note, each vanished dollar, each shadow and smell had built toward that moment, layering suspicion, fear, and determination into a crescendo I could no longer ignore. And as I tucked Jacob into bed that night, watching him yawn under the dim lamp, I whispered a silent promise to myself. The basement would not hold its secrets forever. Not if I had anything to say about it. The day I finally opened that basement door, the air in the house felt heavier than usual, as if it had been holding its breath for decades. It was a Friday, the sun slipping through the curtains in long golden slants that barely reached the floor where I stood, trembling in my slippers. Robert had left as usual, muttering something about errands and appointments, but I didn't believe him anymore. I had been waiting, watching, collecting small pieces of the puzzle for years. The key turned in my hand, surprisingly easy, almost like it had been waiting for me. And then, with a final breath that I didn't know I still had left, I pushed the door open. The basement was dark, the kind of darkness that smells like earth and dust and old wood. My eyes adjusted slowly, and what I saw first was the rows of boxes, stacked neatly against the walls, each labeled in Robert's meticulous handwriting. My hands shook as I reached for one, and inside I found letters, hundreds of them, stacked with care, all addressed to me but never sent. They spoke of regret, of shame, of love turned fragile over time. Each word hit me like a hammer, and I sank to the floor, clutching the first letter I could read. "Margaret, I know you'll never see these, but I had to keep them safe until the right time. I was scared of hurting you, scared of myself, scared of losing what mattered most. I hope one day you understand." The words blurred through tears I hadn't realized I'd been holding back for years. And then I saw it, a small safe tucked into the corner, the same one Robert had always touched, always kept locked. My hands found the combination in the memory of numbers I had seen him write down in the margins of old papers, and I turned it slowly. Inside were documents, old contracts, evidence of financial mistakes he had tried desperately to fix alone, hidden from me, hidden from everyone. The basement wasn't a place of malice. It was a vault of guilt, of fear, of a man who didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't hear Robert come home. I didn't even hear Emily calling from the kitchen. My world had shrunk to the dust motes dancing in the slivers of light and the truth lying bare before me. When Robert finally saw me crouched there, holding the letters, his face went pale, and for the first time I saw him as he truly was, vulnerable, flawed, human. His voice cracked as he tried to explain, stumbling over words he had rehearsed for decades. "Maggie, I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could fix it. I was wrong." I listened, my heart breaking and expanding all at once. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to let anger pour out, but instead I sat silently, letting him speak, letting the decades of fear and secrets spill into the quiet of that basement. He told me about investments gone wrong, debts that had accumulated without our knowing, and a fear so profound he didn't trust anyone to help him, not even me, the woman he vowed to love forever. The basement, the locked hours, the secrecy, they were born from desperation, not betrayal. Each explanation tore at me and healed me simultaneously. I wanted to feel relief, but the shock was so deep, so visceral that my knees shook and I had to steady myself against the wall. For 25 years, we had lived alongside this hidden world, oblivious yet intertwined with it, and now everything was laid bare. I remember sitting down on the concrete floor, Robert beside me, both of us surrounded by years of letters, papers, and boxes. Emily and Jacob appeared, drawn by curiosity, their eyes wide, questioning. I held their hands, and for the first time in a long while I spoke honestly, telling them about the mistakes, the fear, the secrecy, and the lessons hidden within. Robert's eyes glistened with tears, and in that basement, amidst the scent of dust and old wood, we began to unravel the weight we had been carrying. It wasn't easy, it was messy, and there were moments of anger, of disbelief, of sorrow. But slowly, the layers of shock gave way to understanding, and the basement, once a symbol of distance and mystery, became a place of reckoning, of connection, of revelation. After that day the house felt different. The air seemed lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. Robert no longer needed to lock himself away, and I no longer feared the shadows. The letters remained, a testament to the man he was and the man he had tried to be, the mistakes he had made and the courage it took to finally face them. I sat with him that evening, holding his hand, and whispered a prayer of gratitude, not just for the answers, but for the endurance, for the patience, for the love that had survived decades of silence and fear. That day I realized that even the deepest secrets, the heaviest burdens, could eventually give way to truth, understanding, and ultimately the possibility of healing. The days following that basement revelation were some of the hardest I have ever lived. It wasn't just the shock of the hidden debts or the letters that had been silently waiting for me. It was the sudden realization that we had been living on borrowed time, financially and emotionally, for decades. Robert had spent years trying to shield me from the truth, and now the weight of that silence pressed down on both of us at once. I remember waking up that first morning after the discovery and seeing the sun streak across the kitchen floor. It felt cold somehow, even though the warmth of the summer was pouring through the windows. I sat at the table, Emily and Jacob already at their breakfast, and tried to act normal. But the tension clung to my chest like a heavy shawl I couldn't shrug off. We had to face reality. Bills that had been buried in folders and envelopes suddenly loomed large. There were notices we had ignored because Robert had hoped to fix everything quietly, promises he had made to lenders without consulting me, and slowly, painfully, the truth of how precarious our lives had been revealed itself. The first week I found myself pacing the floors at night, jotting down every detail, every note, every phone call we needed to make. Robert would sit beside me, head in his hands, and I could see the deep regret etched into the lines of his face. We didn't speak much at first. Words felt insufficient, almost too fragile to describe the years of fear, pride, and shame that had accumulated like dust in every corner of the house. I had to take on more than I had ever imagined. The small cleaning jobs I had done years ago were no longer enough. I began sewing and mending for neighbors, taking in alterations, anything that could help us slowly regain a foothold. Emily, though only a teenager, sensed the tension and tried to help, tidying, cooking small meals, offering quiet words of encouragement. Jacob, curious and clever, started helping in small ways too, running errands or delivering items I had made. The home felt heavier with responsibility, but there was also a strange kind of energy, an urgency that pushed us forward. Every day was a balancing act between managing what we owed and nurturing the family we feared we might lose if the stress became too much. I remember one night, a particularly bitter winter evening, when a neighbor came over to check on us. She had heard whispers around town of financial trouble, and her voice was gentle but edged with pity. "Margaret, is everything all right?" she asked. I smiled politely, holding back tears, nodding, but inside I felt the sharp sting of judgment. It wasn't just money. It was the way society watches, measures, and whispers. I realized then how much I had relied on appearances, how much I had feared the opinion of others. But that night, as the wind rattled the windows, I promised myself I would no longer let fear dictate my actions. I would do what was necessary, quietly, with dignity and resolve. Robert struggled too. The shame of his hidden debts weighed heavily on him. Some nights I would find him sitting in the living room, staring at the letters, muttering apologies he could never deliver properly. He tried to apologize, tried to make amends, but the truth is, some wounds are not so easily healed. And yet we endured. We endured because there was no other choice. The children needed us, our home needed us, and deep inside, our love, though fractured, remained. I learned how to budget with precision, how to negotiate with creditors, how to stretch every penny until it could barely breathe. I became an orchestrator of survival, blending careful planning with emotional resilience. Months passed, each day a trial and an opportunity to grow stronger. I learned to face the world without hiding behind polite smiles or fragile patience. I became fiercely protective of my family, fiercely determined to ensure that our hardships did not define us. There were nights of tears, yes, and moments when I thought the burden might crush me, but slowly, steadily, we carved a new path forward. Robert, once burdened with secrecy, began to speak more openly, sharing not just the mistakes of the past, but the lessons he had learned. The basement, once a symbol of fear and concealment, now held only memories of reckoning and the beginning of understanding. By the end of that first year after the discovery, I had started a small business from home, making handmade crafts and sewn goods for neighbors and local shops. Emily and Jacob thrived in their own ways. Emily's art began selling at local fairs, and Jacob's inventive mind found ways to contribute to our household projects. The weight of financial struggle was still there, but it no longer felt like a cage. We had transformed it into motivation, resilience, and a deeper connection with one another. And as I tucked the children into bed each night, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not just for survival, but for the courage to confront the truth, to endure the consequences, and to emerge stronger on the other side. The months turned into years, and with each passing day, I felt a shift within myself, a quiet, steady transformation I hadn't known I was capable of. At first, I had simply focused on survival, keeping the house, paying the bills, making sure Emily and Jacob never went without. But slowly, that instinctive determination evolved into something more. I began seeing possibilities where before I had only seen obstacles. I learned to trust my own judgment, to make decisions without fear of failure, and to embrace the strength that had been quietly growing inside me all along. I started small with the skills I already had: sewing, cooking, organizing. I created a line of handmade crafts and clothing, taking orders from neighbors and eventually selling to shops in town. At first it was exhausting. My hands were raw from sewing long into the nights, my eyes strained from counting stitches and measuring fabric. But with every order completed, every satisfied customer, I felt a little more capable, a little more in control. Robert watched in awe, sometimes silently, sometimes offering the rare word of encouragement. He too was changing, learning humility and partnership after decades of trying to handle everything alone. Emily and Jacob became my quiet allies. Emily's artwork, once a hobby she pursued alone in her room, began to gain attention in local galleries and craft fairs. I helped her display her paintings, negotiate prices, and write descriptions for customers. Her confidence soared, and I felt pride deeper than I had imagined possible, seeing her talents recognized. Jacob, ever curious and inventive, helped me with practical aspects of the business, delivering orders, helping construct display racks, and figuring out ways to market my crafts. Together we became a small, resilient team, bound not by perfection, but by perseverance, love, and a shared commitment to rebuild our lives. The basement, once a place of secrecy and fear, transformed too. We repurposed it into a workshop and storage area. The boxes of letters and old documents were carefully preserved. But the space was no longer ominous. Instead, it hummed with creativity, with life, with the tangible energy of a family united in purpose. I remember standing at the top of the stairs one evening, looking down at the children working together to sort materials for a craft fair, and feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. We had taken a place that once held fear and shame and turned it into a hub of growth, learning, and empowerment. I also began to engage more with the community, offering workshops to other women on sewing, craft making, and home-based business skills. Many of them were in situations similar to mine, struggling silently with financial or personal challenges. Sharing my story carefully with warmth and honesty became a source of strength not just for me but for others. It was remarkable to see how resilience could ripple outward, how one woman's courage could inspire others to confront their own hidden fears and limitations. Robert, for his part, adapted as well. He learned to ask for help, to share responsibility, to admit mistakes without shame. Our marriage shifted from secrecy and isolation to partnership and honesty. We had conversations late into the night about dreams, fears, and the life we still wanted to build together. Those talks were sometimes uncomfortable, filled with lingering guilt or regret, but they were honest. And honesty, I learned, was the most powerful tool of all in transforming not just our marriage but our entire family dynamic. By the time Emily graduated high school and Jacob began college, our home had transformed entirely. It wasn't perfect, life rarely is. But it was vibrant, full of laughter, learning, and mutual respect. I had discovered that transformation isn't always sudden or dramatic. Sometimes it comes quietly in the small victories, the lessons learned from mistakes, and the relentless courage to keep moving forward despite fear and doubt. And so, sitting in the kitchen on a quiet evening, I reflect on those years, not with bitterness but with gratitude. I see the journey of a woman who learned to stand on her own, who faced fear, disappointment, and betrayal, yet found strength, skill, and empowerment in the process. My children are thriving, our family is resilient, and the basement that once held secrets now holds tools, materials, and memories of the courage that reshaped our lives. The house felt warmer that evening, though the sun had long dipped below the horizon. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, the same one I had watched the seasons change from for decades, and I allowed myself a rare moment of stillness. Robert was in the basement, quietly working on a shelving project for my craft supplies, and the children were upstairs, voices mingling in laughter as they organized Emily's latest art pieces. For the first time in a very long time, the house felt alive in a way that wasn't weighed down by secrets or fear. I thought back to that day I broke down the basement door, the fear that had gripped me, the shock and heartbreak, and I realized something profound. Our lives had been shaped not just by the secrets and mistakes but by how we responded to them. We could have crumbled under the weight of years of fear and debt, letting resentment poison our relationships and our hearts. But instead we had faced the truth, worked through it, and built something stronger. That is a lesson I carry with me every day. The past can hurt, but it can also teach, guide, and even heal if we have the courage to confront it. I remember sitting with Emily one evening, long after the children had gone to bed, as she asked me quietly about those letters I had found in the basement. "Mom," she said, "why didn't you ever tell us sooner?" I took a deep breath and explained that some truths are difficult, that sometimes love means protecting others until they're ready to understand. But I also shared the most important part, that secrets, even when born from care, can weigh heavily, and that honesty, courage, and resilience are the true markers of strength. She listened, eyes wide, absorbing every word, and I knew that the lessons I had learned in silence were now being passed to the next generation. Robert, too, had changed. Gone were the quiet Friday rituals, replaced with shared projects, conversation, and laughter. I could see the relief in his eyes, the weight of decades lifted by honesty and partnership. We often sit together on the porch, holding hands, reminiscing about the past without dwelling in regret, reflecting instead on the growth it forced upon us. Our bond, once strained by fear and secrecy, had been strengthened by facing the unknown together. There is a peculiar beauty in that kind of transformation, the knowledge that even after mistakes and missteps, love and trust can be rebuilt, stronger and more genuine than before. I also think of the broader life lessons, the wisdom that has taken decades to cultivate. I have learned that fear is not always a warning but sometimes a barrier we build ourselves. I have learned that silence can protect but also imprison. I have learned that resilience is not a trait we are born with but one we cultivate through experience, through endurance, and through the unwavering commitment to keep moving forward even when the future seems uncertain. Most importantly, I have learned that family, imperfect, complicated, human, can be a source of immeasurable strength when nurtured with honesty, patience, and love. As I reflect on all this, I am filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the endurance, and for the chance to witness my children grow into strong, compassionate, capable adults. Emily's art continues to flourish, her spirit vibrant and creative, and Jacob has found a career that brings him joy and purpose, informed by the values of perseverance and integrity that we instilled together. I see in them the fruits of a life rebuilt after hardship, a reminder that the struggles of the past do not define the future unless we allow them to. I often speak to other women, quietly sharing pieces of my story, encouraging them to confront the fears or secrets they may carry. I tell them that it is never too late to reclaim agency over your life, to stand tall despite years of hardship, and to transform pain into strength. Life, I have found, is rarely perfect, but it is rich with opportunities to learn, grow, and rebuild. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give ourselves and those we love is the courage to face the truth and the patience to nurture the transformation that follows. And so, as I sit in my chair watching the twilight settle over the garden, I feel a calm I have not known in decades. The basement door, once a symbol of fear and secrecy, now stands open, a testament to courage, perseverance, and transformation. Our home, our family, and I have all been reshaped by those years of endurance and honesty. And as I sip my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my hands and chest, I am reminded that the greatest strength often comes not from perfection, but from resilience, love, and the unwavering commitment to move forward, even when the past feels unbearably heavy. The years that followed felt like a slow unfolding of sunlight through the trees, gentle, warm, and steady. By this time I had grown used to the rhythm of our transformed life. Fridays were no longer tense or silent. They became days for small projects, for laughter, for shared moments with Robert and the children. The basement, once a place that had held shadows and secrets, now smelled of fresh paint, wood polish, and fabric scraps from my craft projects. It was a space of creativity and purpose, a place where mistakes could be corrected and growth could happen. I often found myself walking through the house, pausing to notice the little things I had once taken for granted. The smell of Emily's paints drying on her easel, the hum of Jacob's small inventions on the workbench, the sound of Robert whistling softly as he assembled shelving units. These ordinary moments felt extraordinary because they were no longer tainted by fear or uncertainty. They were proof that a family could heal, that a home could transform, and that resilience could manifest quietly in the everyday. One chilly evening I gathered Emily and Jacob in the living room. We sat close together, the glow of a single lamp casting soft shadows on the walls. I spoke to them about the basement, about the locked doors, about the decades of silence and fear. I didn't spare them the truth, but I framed it with lessons of courage, perseverance, and the importance of facing the unknown. I told them how Robert had struggled with shame and pride, how I had struggled with fear and doubt, and how together we had built a life stronger than before. Their eyes were wide, absorbing every word, but I could see understanding and admiration growing in them. It was a moment of connection I will treasure forever, a moment when the past was acknowledged, but it no longer held power over us. I also spent time reflecting with Robert alone on the lessons we had learned. We spoke of trust, forgiveness, and the importance of communication. We laughed about the small absurdities, cried over the weight of lost years, and promised each other that honesty would guide our lives from then on. I realized that even after decades of silence and fear, love could still thrive if nurtured with patience, humility, and courage. There was a kind of quiet triumph in witnessing our marriage evolve from secrecy and mistrust into understanding and partnership. It was not perfect and it never would be, but it was real and it was ours. Community became an even more important part of our lives. I continued to share my experiences with other women, teaching workshops and mentoring those who had faced hardships similar to my own. I emphasized that empowerment comes not from avoiding mistakes, but from confronting them, learning from them, and using those lessons to build a stronger, more resilient self. Many women told me that hearing my story gave them courage to face secrets, fears, and challenges in their own lives. It was humbling and fulfilling to realize that my journey could inspire others, to see that even after decades of struggle, one could still influence and uplift others. One particularly meaningful day, Emily brought home a letter from a local gallery, inviting her to display her work in a city-wide exhibition. Jacob received recognition for a small invention he had been developing, a creative solution that solved a practical problem in our community. I watched them thrive, and I realized that their strength, courage, and creativity were partly rooted in the lessons they had absorbed from our family's journey. They had witnessed resilience in action, seen mistakes confronted, fears faced, and love nurtured despite the challenges. Their success was a reflection not only of their talents but of the environment we had worked so hard to cultivate, a home filled with honesty, encouragement, and unwavering support. And now, sitting here in the twilight of my life, I feel a quiet contentment. I reflect on the woman I was, the fears I carried, the mistakes that almost consumed us, and the transformation that followed. Life has a way of testing us, of placing obstacles in our path that seem insurmountable, but I have learned that perseverance, courage, and love can overcome even the heaviest burdens. I have learned that secrets, when confronted with honesty and compassion, lose their power and give way to growth. I have learned that family, when nurtured with patience and understanding, can flourish even after years of hardship. So now, to anyone listening, anyone who has ever felt trapped by fear, doubt, or secrets, I offer this gentle truth. It is never too late to reclaim your life, to face the shadows, and to build something stronger. There is hope, even in the darkest corners, even after decades of silence. And as I sip my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my hands and chest, I smile at the journey we have traveled. The basement, once a place of fear, now a testament to courage. The mistakes, once heavy, now lessons that guide us. And the family, once strained, now thriving in love, understanding, and resilience. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting long golden streaks across the kitchen floor. I sat at the table, a steaming cup of tea in my hands, and allowed myself a moment to breathe deeply. The house was quiet, save for the distant sound of Emily sketching in her room and Jacob tinkering in the basement. For decades, Fridays had brought tension and silence, locked doors and secretive footsteps. But now that silence had been replaced with calm, with purpose, with life. The basement, once a symbol of fear and deception, was now a space of creativity and growth. A testament to the journey we had undertaken as a family. Looking back, I marvel at how much those years of struggle shaped us. I remember the fear that had gripped me the first time I discovered Robert's hidden money, the shock of the letters, the tension in the air when the children asked questions I couldn't answer. Each of those moments had seemed unbearable at the time, but they were the building blocks of resilience. They forced me to grow, to discover strength I hadn't known I possessed. I learned to manage our household with determination and skill, to confront the unknown with courage, and to nurture my children not only with love but with lessons of perseverance and honesty. Robert, too, had transformed. The man who once hid in fear had learned to trust, to share, to be vulnerable without shame. We laughed more, spoke more, and appreciated each other in ways we had never done before. Our marriage, once strained by secrecy and fear, had been renewed through honesty and patience. And in watching him navigate his own growth, I learned the profound power of forgiveness, not just for others but for oneself. Holding on to blame and resentment only chained us to the past. Letting go allowed us to move forward together with clarity and purpose. The children, now older, carried forward the lessons of those challenging years. Emily's art flourished, her creativity shining through exhibits and gallery shows, while Jacob's ingenuity and problem-solving skills earned him accolades and opportunities. I watched them with pride and gratitude, knowing that they absorbed more than practical skills. They inherited resilience, courage, and a belief that even when life is complicated, even when mistakes and secrets loom, there is always a path forward if you face it with honesty and heart. I reflect often on the lessons the basement taught me. It was never just a locked door or a secret space. It was a mirror, showing the consequences of fear, pride, and silence, but also the potential for courage, communication, and transformation. Life, I have learned, is rarely easy or predictable. It tests us in ways we cannot foresee. But it is in those moments of trial that we discover who we truly are. The basement, once a source of dread, became a symbol of our family's endurance, a reminder that even hidden fears can be confronted, understood, and ultimately transformed into strength. To anyone listening, anyone who has ever felt trapped by secrets, uncertainty, or fear, I offer this. Do not underestimate your capacity to endure, to grow, and to rebuild. Life may place challenges in your path that seem insurmountable, but the human heart is capable of remarkable resilience. Courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. Love is not flawless, but it can thrive even after years of hardship if nurtured with patience, honesty, and understanding. And family, no matter how complicated, can be the foundation upon which we build a life of hope and purpose. I sit here now, the house bathed in soft light, thinking of the decades behind me and the days still to come. I am no longer the woman who feared the basement, who feared confrontation, who lived quietly under the weight of secrets. I am Margaret, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a survivor. I have learned that strength often grows in silence, that courage often emerges in the quietest moments, and that love, when given room to flourish, can transform even the deepest wounds into wisdom and connection. So as I look out at the garden, watch Emily sketch beneath the oak tree, hear Jacob laughing with a neighbor, and feel Robert's hand lightly resting on mine, I am filled with a profound sense of peace. The basement doors remain open, a silent testament to the journey we endured, the lessons we learned, and the life we have built together. And if there is one thing I hope you carry from my story, it is this. Face the truth, embrace your courage, nurture your relationships, and never underestimate the power of perseverance. Life is fragile, but it is also resilient, and so are you.